Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com or, of course, follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by cinematographer Richard Rutkowski, whose work includes Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, Masters of Air, and Sugar, just to name a few. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I guess my first question for you is, how did you get involved with Sugar on Apple TV?
Well, this was a phone call from a director, a very welcome call from a director that I'd worked with years before, Adam Arkin. And Adam and I had done the first season of The Americans together in New York. He came in and was the producing director on season one, and he did a great job. And we bonded very well on that production. And the show went on to have a very good life critically, and 6 seasons. I did 3 of those. Adam had tried over the years to team us up again on various shows, and I'd always been booked or in something that had a conflict and was impossible. So this was the one that worked out. I was finishing up a series for Hulu down in the Dominican Republic, and I was able to come to Los Angeles. They were able to take me there to work with Adam, and we had a great time.
I've been a camera person for 30 years and I fell in love with cinema. I heard there was free film school in France and I wanted to get into the French film school. I really didn't know anything at the time, but I knew at least how to take pictures. So I said, I'll try for the image department. And then when I miraculously got into the French film school, I fell in love with working with the camera. You're following what's going to be in the movie. So that immediacy that the camera allows is what I loved from the beginning. I'm Kirsten Johnson, and this is my course about documentary cinematography.
What's interesting is in this series, it's almost feels like a love letter to film as well because you guys are referencing films and everything. Like, what was the research for you to prepare for this role?
It was honestly close to 40 years of watching movies. I mean, I had started at college, in film classes, watching Eastern European films, Asian films, early indie American, US based indies, the Cassavetes films and all this. And I was really immersed in it. And I joined camera department roughly 1990 and started coming up through the ranks as a second AC, first AC operator. And throughout, I was going to films. I am of the age that you went out. You went out to Film Forum or the Thalia Theater or Theater 80 St. Mark's and watched movies. And so a lot of the references that Fernando Moraes, the director on the first block, was bringing forward in the production, as well as what Mark was doing with the scripts, was known to me. I didn't have to be told about the Mike Camera films. I'd seen the Mike Camera films. I didn't have to be told about the Big Heat. I'd seen and maybe even written something about the Big Heat. So it was a natural fit. And I remember getting on a phone call with Fernando and his cinematographer of many years, Cesar Charlone. And they spoke to me, and almost immediately we were riffing off of the combined film language, Costa Gravas films and things like that. Not much of it was actually so specifically about sugar. It just was clear that we all loved films and we all loved the technique. And the best thing I can say about the project is, while it works with a nod and a wink to the past, it really goes for it in the present. It really combines things that were not thought of before. It has a different style, and its style, I'd call it bold, but I'd also call it adventuresome. And that was a spirit set right from the beginning. And when Adam and I started our block, we sort of dovetailed right into that spirit of adventure and went with it. And the result is there. I'm very happy with it.
Well, it's very much like a film noir slash neo noir sort of
Mhm.
detective. How did you guys build on that? Like you said, because it looks really good. But it doesn't look, like Touch of Evil where we have these really dark shadows.
Right.
So how did you guys sort of build on that past?
Well, that's such a broad question because it comes down to technique and daily choices.
Mhm,
One choice I remember discussing very specifically was LA should feel like a heightened version of Los Angeles, should feel like an over hot light. There's a celestial component to the story. There's a galactic
mhm,
component to the story. So reflections on water, reflections up from water up into a ceiling, emphasizing the sky, emphasizing time. These were already built into the work. And Sugar is himself a mystery in
mhm.
sort of the classic noir style. You're watching a man research a mystery, but the true mystery lies in himself and what we're going to discover with him about himself. And so it was very clear that make sure to we should make sure to keep that in mind and keep the camera close to Sugar when he's in a scene, like the way you follow Jake Gittes in Chinatown, very
Mm.
close to his shoulders, his head, the back of his head. And Jake Gittes leads you through the world of Chinatown. You discover the corruption. This was the same idea here, and thankfully, with the actor Colin, we had someone who knows camera choreography very well and can accommodate and also suggest things that will help extend a shot, things that will help move the shot forward in ways that you didn't even maybe think of when you first conceived it.
So what would you say was one of the more challenging scenes for you that you had to light?
Oh, that's very interesting. I mean, taking the big crane shot off the sky and down the Warner Theater marquee and
Mhm.
flowing into the space with Colin, and then discovering about 200 people in the space, that required some planning.
Just a little
Um,
bit?
yeah, the I don't know what to say. Each challenge just felt like another opportunity. Even the
Mhm,
challenge of like how do we make our work appear in a slipstream that's not too divergent from what happens with Fernando and Cesar in Block One. That some people think, well, that must be a challenge, or you must have to bend things. It's like, no, it was a wonderful opportunity. It was an opportunity to work with
mhm,
talented people. There was mutual respect. We formed an easy communication and a partnership. I picked up on things he liked, and he looked at some of the ways I was lighting stages. He'd never lit big stages in LA, and he picked up on some things there, and he did a great job. I mean, the
mhm,
results are in, and it's beautiful. The I think if I were to think about a specific challenge, and it won't be the most visually captivating sequence, but there's a sequence in episode 4 where Colin and Melody come to the door of a woman who has a history with Davy Siegel, has this sad
mhm,
history where he sexually exploits and blackmails her, and she breaks down and tells them about it, and she's sitting and they're sitting. So it's a very static scene, and the camera keeps moving and keeps changing, and the edits propel the information. And a lot of people think, oh, a big action sequence or something that like cars and helicopters overhead. I've done all that. I
mhm,
find that on the page and in the description of the action, visual material is already being delivered. It's in a scene like this, where you essentially have a very important, heavily emotional scene, three persons, uh, very importantly to our listeners, and they really, acknowledge and enforce what she has to say, and that's a quality of their acting, quality of the subtlety that they bring to it, quality of the woman who's doing the long run with her dialogue and
mhm.
staying in it. And we filmed it over and over again, different angles, moving it sometimes during the photography. And I'm happy with that. And that felt like a challenge because it all had to remain at this sort of note, this sort of like, you know, chord or note on the keyboard that rings all through the scene. So I felt like that was an accomplishment.
One of the things you sort of touched on this before is like finding the look so that it felt like LA and it looked like LA. And that was one of the things that sort of stood out for me is that if it was, from my trips to LA, it feels like LA. And I'm wondering, did you guys sort of, like when I talk to cinematographers, a lot of them turn to like paintings or photographs. Did you guys turn to any street photographers in LA for inspiration?
In fact, we did. I had shown them Philip Lorca de Corsia, among other photographer examples. And we looked at old movies too.
Mhm.
Uh, things like The Long Goodbye or The Grifters, or very necessarily LA Confidential, because we share the actor James Cromwell. I mean, how much
Yeah.
more referential can you get? We have the villain from LA Confidential brought here to play a villain, very much in the mold of John Huston in Chinatown.
Yeah.
So we knew that we wanted LA to have a sort of harshness to the light, but at the same time, a lot of beauty. And it relates
Mhm.
to the character Sugar, who's always observing and taking notes. And the ultimate arc is he's trying to find what's the beauty and what's the depravity within human beings, which we don't
Mhm.
understand at first why he's searching that, but we do find out. And within his search, there's a lot of beauty to be found. So at the
Mhm.
beginning of 3, he's sleeping on a chair because the dog has made it impossible to sleep in his bed. And he's observing reflections, morning reflections on the ceiling. And that idea emerged that morning as we lit the set. It is a set, by the way. That's not a real
Mhm.
location. And I was very happy with my gaffer Tracy and grip Dave that we were able to sell interior sets as seamlessly as possible across to the outside locations. This happened at Ruby's. This happened at his bungalow at the Hotel
Mhm.
Corazon. This happened with the apartment where the bad guys are trying to torture information out of Melody. So I feel like that observation, and you're working with him to observe them, gives you a little bit of a fresh vision of the city. And we drive around a lot, day and night, and we exploit the sort of beauty of multicolored lights down Hollywood Boulevard or down Franklin, and then the beauty of going in and out of deep shadow while he's driving. And things that would ordinarily, you might say, well, I want to control this more. We were open to, let's not control it. Let's let it be a little bit more real.
No, I would love to know, when you get these scripts, do you like what kind of notes do you make on them? What do you pull out of them to sort of figure out how you're going to light something?
Notes is exactly it. I write notes down the margins of every page. And for me, the work begins on the page. It's very clear to me that the most important element in any endeavor like this, especially streaming television, is to get familiar with and get into the mindset of the scripts and propel what's the subtext of those scripts forward into the visual. I always say context is character. So you can have a person on screen, maybe you've been introduced to them through different scenes, but you can come to a moment where you're just alone with that character on screen. And if you know where you're at in the arc of the story and the tone of the script, you can bring into the image things that fill in that context of where that character is, what's next. It gives the audience a reassurance that their own thought processes are valued. And I try all the time to come up with that. And yeah, we make notes about, is this going to be a process trailer or some version of a free drive? Is this going to be car-to-car work? Is this going to need a third camera on a certain day for a certain
Mhm.
sequence? Are we going to use surveillance cameras in this sequence, so we have to grab different shots to feed a monitor, that sort of thing?
Probably one of the smartest things I've ever done for my career. It gave me all the tools that I needed to be able to jump into a new career.
Getting myself into a mindset, thinking like an editor, and being around people that I can talk to on that level was really invaluable to me.
A lot of the things that I learned from that class, I still think about.
I loved the classroom. I loved the computer stations. We built a sense of community.
And it also instills a lot of confidence in you to take that and go out into the world.
After I took the class, I felt very prepared to take the next step.
I owe Manhattan Workshop the career that I have right now.
Things have been going great, and I really have the Manhattan Workshop to thank for that.
Well, in thinking about, the tone, like how did the tone guide you on set and how did that sort of help you figure out what you were going to do?
Well, the main thing that the tone does is give you respect for where the actor and actors in ensemble scenes needs to be, like where they need to sit in that moment in the story. And I can think of the example in episode 4 when Sugar drops Melody off at her house, and they sit in the open-topped car and they have a very, emotionally frank conversation about whether she believes in human beings anymore? Does she believe that life is beautiful, essentially? And he works on convincing her that life is beautiful. And for that to just take place in a parked car, California suburbia in front of a house, I thought that that was an opportunity to make it quite lovely, to really exploit the natural light. I don't believe maybe I used one lighting instrument to help fill, but I really let it be shaping the light that was there. So it's that tone that the actors get to, and then you have to meet it with your photography. Another example also in 4 is Dennis playing Bernie comes home in the early morning. We timed the shot of his car arriving in his driveway to be just the edge of dusk and selling it as morning time. And he's been away at the beach house that he has, essentially cheating on his wife. He's been with his ex-wife. What's going on? And he comes home and his wife says, come to bed. And he goes, no, I want to do some work. And he goes to the office of their beautiful Hollywood Hills home, and he unlocks a cabinet and pulls out photo albums. So he starts dwelling in his former relationship with a now deceased woman. They had children. And it's a very quiet and very simple scene. I remember getting the camera up on Dennis's face for the close-up, and often you think, well, what should I do here? Is there something I'm going to do to bring out more the mood of this? And no, it was just right, and he did a great job. And so you have to be available in your own sight and mind to see when that's there for you. And then if it isn't, you have to do some work. So I try to say to myself, what's this tone? What's the moment we're meeting? What does the actor offer without me doing anything? And then is there something I can do that gives them a special place? I felt like that with Jonathan Siegel in the movie theater. It's a subtle thing, no one else might recognize it, but in the movie theater, when he's watching his deceased wife, Lorraine Everly, in this supposed movie Winds of Change, his face is brighter than all of the rest of the spectators. You go to Bernie, you go to Sugar, other people watching, it's Jonathan Siegel's face that has the most light, because he's enwrapped by the once life he was living with this actress.
Interesting. I'd love to know, because the industry's changed so much in the last 20 years, and one of the big things is the role of a colorist coming in and becoming more than just switching the lights as you do your prints. And so I'm wondering, in your work, but also on this show, like, how do you like to work with the colorist to get the final look? Or, like, how much are you capturing on set versus bringing it into the colorist to help you get that final look?
It's actually how much I work with a colorist to get the initial look. So we created a fresh LUT for the show called K-Lady, and this was something Cesar and I and the colorist at MTI worked hard on. And Matt's his name, really great guy. And we wanted to be able to shoot in harsh light with overexposure, but still have a roll-off that was filmic and pleasing. We wanted to see down into detail in the darks, but we didn't want it to be soft or muddy down there. It wanted to still feel filmic. And so we did that in pre-production. We finessed it, and then you look at it again, and then you take it back into the suite and you look at it on your cameras, and then you say, okay, we've come about as far as we can. Then I had Kyle, our on-set DIT, and he's very smart and works very quickly in live grade, and he would show me little trims, like pull a little magenta out, give some blue back to the shadow, take a little bit of warmth to the highlight, so now everything else by comparison has a tiny bit of cyan. And the process of doing that was very successful. And then those live grade adjusts, trims, we could call them, get into the workflow all the way to final color. When we got to final color, I don't remember large adjustments. I remember cleaning things up, especially when you're shooting day or night exterior without totally controlled lighting. You wind up cleaning up or helping to match some things. But there was very little that received a whole new look. And in fact, if anything, it just went back more towards what we had initially thought. So I feel like the colorist's role, especially digital, is actually very important at the front end. Even on this show I'm starting right now, I'm working on getting the new look that we want for the director's sort of vision of the lighting to be as close as possible so that when we see it on the monitor on set, when they get into editorial, they have as close a representation to what the intention was as possible.
Wow. Now, I have one last question for you. Now, we've asked you our normal question, but you mentioned today that you've got 40 years of education in film, in watching films and what have you. Is there a particular filmmaker that you or a film that you saw that you think more people need to be aware of?
I don't know how many people have seen Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory. And Paths of Glory is an exceptionally well-made film, very, very interestingly shot and conceived and acted. And on a B note to that, a B side to that, because it's also a quote unquote wartime film, is Dr. Strangelove. And Terry Southern's script to Dr. Strangelove is about as good as it gets, in my opinion. I mean, I've seen lots and lots of parodies or, sort of dark fairy tales about what could happen if humankind were to turn all of its intelligence into catastrophe. And this is one of the better ones and has standalone performances that are just unbelievable. Slim Pickens, George C. Scott, many people. I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, Slim Pickens plays Major Kong. James Earl Jones. James Earl Jones has a magnificent performance in Dr. Strangelove. So
that film also has my favorite line, which is "There's no fighting in the war room." It always gets a laugh out of me. Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you today.
Oh no, that's my pleasure. I just am realizing I quoted 2 black and white movies. A movie I went to watch again recently, shot by Philippe Rousselot, Diva, also held up incredibly well. Incredibly, like it just reminded me of why I got into filmmaking. It's a small-ish story that it blossoms like an enormous flower. It becomes very large and beautifully shot.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for letting me interview you today.
My pleasure, man.
And that's our show for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com or, of course, on Instagram at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Brickell. Thanks for watching.